Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. On this episode, I got to speak to the amazing voice actor, Bill DeWees. Bill and I talked about how he started out in the voiceover industry, marketing mistakes made by voiceovers, how one style of voiceover is actually a thing of the past. We also talked about helpful tips that I know all you listeners will enjoy. So sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. All right, and now I have one of the best in the business coming on the show today. I've been waiting for this one for a long time. I think him and I were messaging probably last month or two, and I've been talking to a lot of people who've been on this show, and they're super excited. Welcome to the show with over 49,000 YouTube subscribers, and probably I'd say the digital mentor to all of us voice actors, Bill DeWees. Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast.
Curt, thank you. Digital mentor. I like that. Can I borrow that? I've been looking for something new for my business cards. I like that. That's good. Thanks.
Absolutely. I just recently, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, the 5 mistakes of marketing. And I think it was perfect to start off because a lot of us voice actors starting off 2022, the world's still a little crazy, marketing, trends, where we're going in the world, because you opened my eyes, and I'll talk about it again. One of the mistakes voice actors make in their marketing, and I tell you, it did change my behaviors in marketing. So starting the show off, how did you get into this industry? I mean, because you've been in it for a while. I started back in 2001. I think you started out around that same time too.
90. Hold on a second. 90, that was a whole other career back in the 90s. 2006 is when I started.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what got you into this industry?
Necessity. I was, and I won't bore you with all the details of my past, but I think you're a former broadcaster, right?
I got into radio back in 1998 when I started DJing, the clubs, and
right.
So I'm 46, so it shows my age real quick. And interned, and I started doing radio advertisements, and that's what got me into voice acting, because I was doing sales. Getting on the air was a lot harder than it is now, but they're like, just be a voiceover. I'm like, all right, fine.
That'll work.
Right.
Well, by the age of 12 or so, I knew I wanted to be a disc jockey. That's what I wanted. That's all I wanted. That. I mean, aside from I wanted to be a pro basketball, football, and baseball player, and tennis and golf. Aside from that, though, I wanted to work in broadcasting, and I did. So the first 13 years, I think, of my working career, working different radio stations, primarily in the Columbus, Ohio market, and then I ended up. I was recruited to teach broadcasting at a university in the Chicago area, and I headed up their broadcast program. So I became a professor and I taught, and then I would moonlight in the evening teaching marketing for their MBA program. Ended up going from there to work at a business consulting firm, and then from there into a corporate learning services company where we would create high performance training environments for corporate, different corporations, mostly Fortune 500s. And that company ended up going out of business. So to answer your question, what happened was I lost my job. And so the question was, what's next? And I thought, you know what? I've always been fascinated with the idea of voiceover. I had a morning show partner for quite a while. Her name was Beth Kay. She'd been in Chicago forever. And she would occasionally go out, and after we'd do the morning show, then she would go out and have these voiceover gigs. And she would, tell me stories of things she had done and people she had known. And I thought, wow, that would be amazing. But I, at that point in time, as you know, it was this is back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And back then you needed an agent. You had to have an agent pretty much to get access to the good stuff. You had to be available to drive into the city to do the auditions. And then if you were fortunate enough to get the job, you had to drive back.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a career and kids and a wife, and it just, I couldn't make that work. So anyhow, but by the time 2006 rolled around, that was the beginning, the launch of voices.com, Voice 123, online platforms. And so I thought, well, let's just take the marketing knowledge that I have and my passion for working behind a mic, and let's see what we can do. And fortunately it worked.
You're doing fantastic. Like I said, and you hit the spots where voice actors need to listen, a lot of your advice. And, one thing that I always like to talk about is behaviors. What are some of your behaviors? Like when you get up in the morning and you start your day, because consistency is one of those mistakes that people, like you talk about, that people don't, they don't focus on. So what's behaviors for you like in the morning? Because
I love that question, Curt, because it's, people love to look at the end goal and the dream and the vision, but that only happens if you have the right behaviors and you consistently execute those behaviors every single day. So, going back, let's go back to the beginning of my career, especially, because the behaviors change based on the business and what you're doing and so on and so forth. But early on, it was all about, I was consistently searching for ways to get in front of the right people. And I was constantly direct marketing myself. I could boil 90% of all of my activity, my behavior revolved looking for places that I like, video production companies in particular. They're by far the biggest provider of jobs for voiceover talent because they're content creators. And so, of course, I auditioned my butt off. On Voices and Voice 123, and I was fortunate enough to get some work that way, a lot over the years. But it took a while. I remember it took 100 auditions to get the first job, and I remember thinking it was going to be a lot easier than that. Why I thought that, I don't know. I guess I assumed that my background would easily transition me, but it didn't. As it's a whole different. Voiceover is a different world than broadcasting.
Yeah.
And so I auditioned, and I was constantly on my computer looking for video production houses. And I would call them, I would send emails. And over time, I was able to get enough clients and then repeat clients, which is really the key, I think, to building any kind of business, repeat clients. And so those are the things that really kind of got me here. And today I still do a lot of those things, but now a big part of my business is just keeping my current client base happy. So it's, doing pickups. I do tons of pickups every day. That's just part of the gig, So that's what I'm working on this morning, but just making sure that I'm giving high quality work to my clients and turning those things around quickly, having availability, during regular business hours. Those are the kind of things that are really my daily habits.
Those are great. That's great advice. Networking was actually the next question I was going to ask. With LinkedIn, is probably most of the voice actors I talk to, LinkedIn's probably their number one go-to. Their social media, but networking. And I was talking to a fellow voice actor last week, and we were talking about strategy. And I said, a lot of voice actors focus on having 10 million followers or having so many followers, or just, I guess, being famous. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I think if you have even 100 followers, you take those 100 followers, but make them something to help build your brand. Wouldn't you agree that that's what people need to focus on? The followers that are following need to purchase your product or want to hire you for your service. You think that's something that is important?
It's the right followers. I think you touched on something really important because, for instance, and I hadn't heard a friend talking about this the other day, that most, and he's right, most voiceover talent, what they do is they network by trying to get in front of other voiceover talent.
Right.
Well, they're not hiring.
Right.
They're in the same boat you're in. They're just trying, so they're networking to each other to no avail. There's no traction there because that's not your audience. But you're right. I would rather have 100. I'd rather have 25 content creators that use voiceover follow me than 100,000 voiceover talent in terms of marketing my voiceover services, because it's about being in front of the right people, about being in front of them consistently, about giving them the right message. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that.
So, and you're a voiceover coach as well. And I want to talk about, auditioning. And it recently came upon me the other day, and I have a couple of voiceover coaches I speak with, the importance of having a coach. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and, one, you are a coach, when you look at a script, and it may be very vague because some of these auditions we get, I'm not talking about the ones on the pay to play, the ones you get from the client, the production company, they're like, hey, I need this, but I need it this way. Having a coach can actually help your auditions with, like, you can audition and send it to that person. Wouldn't you agree how important having a coach getting into this business is nowadays, because with those vague scripts you get from those production houses?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of it. And I think early on, especially, you need a coach to help you. Well, and first of all, there's a lot of coaches, and there's some really good ones out there, but you want to make sure that you're hiring somebody who can actually do what you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, I remember when I first got in the business, there were some folks out there who they were coaching, but they weren't working in voiceover anymore because they couldn't figure out how the new economy worked.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they could help me with something. I'm not saying they couldn't help me with maybe interpreting a script or a performance, but they couldn't build their business anymore. So I think you've got to, make sure that whatever it is you're looking for, that person can deliver to you. But yes, I think having a voiceover coach can really help you with that early on. And if I may kind of expound on that a little bit, because
Absolutely.
you said something really important. You talked about it, because for those of you who are just getting involved, and maybe you haven't done this long enough to see this trend, but when you get scripts, like audition scripts, it's not uncommon to be given 25 conflicting adjectives on how they give you all of this direction. And by the time you're done reading the direction, it can be so confounding and confusing. Not that I look at direction to try to get a general idea of where they want to go, but here's what I've learned over the years, and this has helped me win more auditions than I could count. And that is, at some point, after doing this for several years, I realized that unless I could be genuine, in other words, it's not me trying to do my impersonation of this actor or that actor with this frame of mind or this tone, high energy, but yet chill. And, all of this stuff that get thrown at you. I had to look at a script and say, okay, how would Bill DeWees respond?
Mm-hmm.
How would I feel about this? And be honest, an honest audition. And when I began doing that, Curt, my audition win rate jumped dramatically, because I just kind of set all that aside and said, okay, let me be me here. And because oftentimes, people don't hire you because how you sound. They hire you because of how you make them feel. So in other words, can you generate trust in that person? If something genuine connects, your chance of winning that audition go up dramatically. Yeah, I mean, you'll never win every audition. Nobody does, or even most auditions. That's why you have to, I heard one of your guests talking about voiceover being a marathon, not a sprint. I could not agree more. Oh my goodness. And a lot of people get into the business, they do 10 auditions and say, well, nobody hired me, therefore I suck. No, you don't. Join the club. That's the way this works. But until and unless you can become honest with the script, meaning how you feel, allowing us a window into your soul, then it just doesn't land.
Absolutely.
So I hope that doesn't muddy the waters at all, but
no, it's perfect.
I think that's so important.
Absolutely. And the next thing I do want to talk about is the 5 marketing mistakes. And like I said, this is probably one of my favorite episodes that you have on your YouTube channel. For those listening, you have to check it out. Bill DeWees' YouTube channel is, like I said, 49,000 followers. I mean, that you're doing something right. And it's,
Thanks.
It's just a fantastic episode. And the thing that my favorite piece that I got out of that was taking your demo and flipping it around to the trends. Meaning, you have a demo, and what I use on this piece is I call it the acronym ABCD. Always be creating demos every day. What I mean by that is I write copy every day, and I read, and I'll make some demos of me reading this ad, and I keep those clips to add on to new demos, because trends are our friends, right? And so you said take your demo and kind of cut it up and flip it up a little bit, because that person, that production house you sent it to, might like your 4th clip better than your 1st clip, because your 1st clip might be dramatic, and they're not looking for dramatic. They're looking for this, because all our demos go up and down. You know what I mean? And I thought, oh my gosh, that's like, it'll save you a bunch of money from getting another demo done. You can just take your demo. We all know how to cut and splice it. So where did you get that?
It's so funny, because much of what I do now that I've done it for a while, I do because it's what I knew as a radio programmer to do. I mean, that's where I learned marketing. But for some reason, when I got into voiceover, I thought, well, this is a different business. So, forget what you know and relearn it based on whatever everybody was saying. Well, get an agent, get a demo, audition, go back to your coach, audition, go back to your coach. And I just wasn't getting the volume of work that I needed to sustain life, And so I thought, let's just go back to what I know. Well, as a radio programmer, and I program stations where music stations where we would report, and, those who are in broadcasting, I'll try to make this so that it's not just broadcast specific. Everybody will hopefully understand this. But if you're in radio, you understand that there's a number of radio stations that report to the trades, Billboard, radio and records, so on and so forth. And those are I programmed several stations like that, to where we were being inundated with product. I mean, in every week, the reps are on the phone begging you to play their songs. And so I remember, as a programmer, I felt like I had a pretty good ear. After a while, you kind of develop an ear for that, what you think people want to hear. And I remember picking songs to play, because you only had so many slots available. You may have 50 songs and only 2 spots available that week for new ads. And I remember picking some songs that I thought were going to be just major hits that were duds. I mean, they went nowhere. They just fizzled out. Other songs that I thought were lame, they ended up being huge hits. So I realized in voiceover that I needed to find out what people would respond to. And I don't care who the demo producer is, or the coach is, or the talent. There's no way we don't know what the market's going. We may have an idea. I remember the first demo that it was produced. I went out to LA, got a high profile producer, and they did a good job, all of that. But I remember the first clip was a Ford Mustang commercial. Number one, that's nothing like my personality. Number two, it was very hard for me to reproduce. Number three, people just didn't respond to it as much because it wasn't my personality. The only way to find out what the market wants is to let them hear it. Consider it market testing for your demo. So here's the recommendation, is that after your demo has been out there for a few months, I mean, you're marketing with it, it's on the platforms, you're doing all of that, rotate it, take turns putting the different clips, number one, because most people don't listen past the first 5 to 10 seconds. They just don't. It's like listening to the radio. People will hit the button, they'll give it 3 seconds. If they don't like it, they go to the next one. It's the same thing with voiceover. Right. I started to treat my business like a radio station, like I was programming a radio station. Well, I'll never forget this. I did an audition once. It was for a Walmart commercial. I didn't get the job. But I was actually one of those few moments that I was impressed with my own work, which doesn't happen very often. I usually, how it is, we tend to kind of, we're very self-critical. But I did this and I thought it just felt genuine to me. Maybe the most genuine thing I'd ever done. So I decided I was going to produce it into a demo piece. I put it at the front of my demo, and boom, it changed there. All of a sudden, people started responding. Oh, I love that Walmart commercial. Do it. And that was 4 years ago. And today, 90% of my clients that contact me say, do the Walmart commercial read. That's my greatest hit. You're looking for your greatest hit or hits, the thing that people respond to. It doesn't mean your other stuff's bad. It just means the market responds to different things differently. So it's like an artist finding a career song. They may like your other songs, but there is a song or two that it resonates with people. It's what they want to hear when they go to your concerts. It's what they want to hear when they, turn on the music in their car. Discover and play your greatest hit.
I love that advice. So, piggybacking off that and going with your demo, I just had another conversation with a fellow voice actor. We're talking about marketing local. And what I mean by that, of course, we all want to be voice actors for national ads, right? Focusing on local businesses to help, put a voice to their brand. So with your brand, is that a big thing you do, is focus local and try to get a lot of business where you're at? You're in a good market. So do you reach out to a lot of production houses and, whatnot to build your brand in that market?
I don't. And let me explain. It's not because I'm only going for national brands. That's not the point at all. Mm-hmm. I think local, but I think broad local. And by the way, my local now, I used to live in the Chicago area, and in the past year, for family reasons, we moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. And what's funny is, even when I was in Chicago, here in Cincinnati, I have clients that are in those markets, but those clients don't even know I'm in that market. Mm-hmm. I don't make it a point to tell them. Don't need to. It's irrelevant. I had, I have an agent in Cincinnati. Interestingly enough, I've had him for years and years. Never had a job from them. But when I moved here, for some reason, they called me. And then they said, hey, somebody wants you. Do you want to record at the studio downtown or do it from your studio? Point being, we have a choice.
Right.
I just do it why would I spend hours going downtown and parking? It was a 10-minute session.
Oh my goodness.
I did it right here, in my studio. So my point being, I market very broadly. I take a very shotgun approach. And yes, being a marketing guy, I understand niche marketing, I understand targeted marketing. But if you want to build, this may feel or sound contrary to much of what you've heard or what you think you should be doing. But in my experience, not just myself, and I've worked with hundreds of students, I start them off with a very broad, you need to find out what the market likes you for. You need to throw it out there to every place you possibly can and to see who responds to what you've got. It takes years to begin to cultivate, I think, understanding what your market is and who your best clients are going to be. I still market very broadly. I do a lot of local stuff, but not local necessarily to Cincinnati. I mean, some of it is, but not. When I market, I don't think Cincinnati. I've got Germany, South America. I mean, all over Europe, Russia, Japan, China. I would say 25% of my work is in Europe, just because there's a big demand for North American English speaking voices, all over the world. So, and occasionally I'll get the national gig, which is great, but there's no way I'm going to bet my career that I'll always be booking national work. I mean, it just does, at least for me, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I've had the privilege of doing some pretty high profile stuff, but that stuff doesn't come along every day or even every month as far as that goes. And there's some years when I don't even see really, really big jobs. But I do a broad range of work and enough to make a really, really good living doing it. So that's why I advocate doing a very broad, especially early on. Now, and even now, I know what people like me for. They like me for the more compassionate, soft-spoken, reflective kind of reads. I do for some reason, I get hospital commercials all the time.
That's good, right?
Yeah, I love it. But that's not all I do. But I'll also do, if somebody wants me for a pickup truck commercial, I'll do that too. But so I would never, if I only focus on hospitals, that's going to be a hard way to make a living. But it's good to understand what people like you for, but you need to really market broadly, I guess is my point.
I love it. And, one thing, the changing of the industry as we, it seems like, it was like you're talking about when Voice 123 Voices and other freelance sites are out there, there's a gobsell out there. It seems like there are a lot of voice actors now really focusing on building their own brand. And do you think that's very important where we are today? Because, Voice 123 and Mandy and Backstage all got together. Would you think voice actors should now focus on their brand because it's not really that many options out there?
I think people get I understand the importance of branding, but I think when you look at this market, I think it's way overemphasized.
Okay.
There needs to be a consistency in how you present yourself and your website and all of that kind of thing. But you have to think of how consumers consume voiceover, how the clients listen to us. They're just, it's like going through radio stations, boom, 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 boom. They're just hitting the button, trying to find somebody that they like. Now, when they land on you, they should get a clear sense of who you are,
right,
and what you're about. So in terms of branding that way, yes. But I think I hear a lot of people, they'll come to me, the first thing they'll say was, help me find my niche. Well, number one, I'll never be able to tell you what your niche is because the market will tell you that. I can help you discover that in that process, and create their brand. Well, does that mean, we should use the colors blue and orange or, there's all of that. I think people worry way too much about that as opposed to focusing on the day-to-day nitty-gritty, non-sexy work of getting those demos in front of the right people. And if you do that, you'll get work.
See, and that's great advice because, I think that's when burnout comes, is when we're focused too much on too many things. Sometimes, you can't find your niche. And the market will tell you. And I think I like that demo idea, switching it up. And if you start slowing down, changing up again, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah.
It's like fishing. It's like fishing out there fishing. Boom. I got that. They like that. That fish likes that. Boom. That fish likes that. I'm going to have some fun with you now. It's time to have fun with the audition challenge. And that
wasn't the fun that we did before?
Oh, no. That's always fun, but I'm going to have fun with you.
Okay. All right.
This is something I sent you. We talked before. I wrote some fun copy. Most of my copy is this off the wall stuff. And I wrote this for you, and I know you can have fun with it. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
You wrote this, huh?
Oh yeah.
You're very, I started my career as a commercial copywriter. So that's a great skill set to have, by the way.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. In sales, you
Yeah.
got to learn how to do it because you got to present something
Oh
to your
my
clients.
gosh. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Okay, let's see. It's cold outside, and we know what you need. You need to come on down to Jill Frost Ice Cream Shack. You need to come on down to Jill Frost Ice Cream Shack with over 3,000 flavors of ice cream and temps inside never over three. Jill's Frost Ice Cream. Stay chill.
Oh my goodness.
Never over three. Oh, that's
Oh,
fun. What a great business concept, too.
oh, sometimes I'll catch myself, and I love writing like nostalgic 80s stuff because I grew up in the 80s and I love the 80s commercials. Like, do you ever go on YouTube and watch some of those?
Yeah, I do.
Like the voice actors back in the day, they had to in those older studios and like the older commercials.
And everything was very proper and very, yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's another thing I want to talk. The announcer, I do occasionally, I have a Fiverr account that I do like announcer voiceovers, like off the wall stuff.
Yeah.
And your daughter is in the industry, and she's a very successful voice actor too. And
he does very, very well.
And Fiverr is big for a lot of voice actors. Some people don't like it, but it's really what works for them. And I think it's still a piece of the voiceover world. So what do you think changed with the whole announcer style voice and the way voice actors act in more natural? What do you think? Why do you think people like the more natural approach nowadays?
I have a theory, and it dates back. And I'm a little bit older than you, so this is something that I lived a little more. But I come from a very earlier on. If you go back like to the 60s, well, actually prior to the 60s, you go back. If you go back early 30s, 40s, 50s, it was a very authoritarian social structure, which I think was born out of a military mindset. And we very much were taught and raised to respect and respond to authority. People, your parents weren't interested in having a conversation with you. They tell you what to do. The government, the church, your family, they said it, you believe it, and you do it. It wasn't your job to talk back, you know what I mean? Or to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
It was to listen and to obey. I'm overgeneralizing, but that's basically, that was the mindset. Well, then we move into the 60s, and then you begin to see a little bit of rebellion against that authoritarian structure. So Woodstock and the music and just the whole culture began to change at that point. That was the beginning of the change. It's been a very slow change in some ways, but I grew up in the 60s and 70s. It was very much an authoritarian structure. People talked at you, not to you or with you. They talked at you. Broadcasters talked at you. Well, that began to change a bit in the 80s and in the 90s. And then you come to today, and people just don't, unless it's done tongue in cheek or ironically, people, they don't respond to that. You must act now, do it now. You must do this. And we don't respond to the big authoritarian voices. We respond to people that we believe, and we don't believe those voices anymore. I mean, they may be trustworthy, but we don't assume they're trustworthy just because they're deep and low and big. But people, voice talent like us, if we can make people feel something, if they can sense a crack in our armor where they actually get a look into our mind and our heart, at least they feel like they do, then they believe you. And that people are looking for people they can trust, and they don't trust perfection. They don't trust slick. I mean, you can see it in music, you can see it in everything. There's been this big evolution, and voiceover is just one example, I think, of that.
That is great advice. I had somebody tell me recently, they're like, you know what, you do better when you just like the way you and I are talking now. It sounds natural. I'm not trying to bring it up a notch and hey, come on.
Right.
And I was doing that when I first started, like, stop, just quit doing that. Just be yourself, talk, because people want relatable, natural people. My last question I want to talk to you about, or I guess it'd be advice. It's my cliche question. So I just started in this industry today, and you're my coach. What advice are you going to give me to stay not just humble, but focused and not losing track to what this industry is about? What advice would you give to me?
I would say, and this is going to sound cliche, but it is so true. 90%, I think, of being successful in voiceover or in any business is about mindset. Because if you don't have the right expectations coming into it, and this is, when the vast majority of people who get into voiceover, they don't succeed. And it's not because they don't have the ability. And I think that's the key thing to know. And they may not be born with a lot of natural talent, but I've seen people who don't have a lot of natural talent develop the skill. And they're not, again, if you were to listen to them, you'd think they're very ordinary, but they're wildly successful because they learned how to get the most out of what they've got, and they learned how to market themselves. But it happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen immediately. And with voiceover, as you know, Curt, it's more about rejection than it is acceptance. And we creatives like to be affirmed. We want to be told that we're good, that we're worthy, that, that we're talented. But the business that we're in, that's not what we get back. We get back usually silence. That's rejection in the form of silence. This is a business about rejection after rejection after rejection. It is a mentally, emotionally, it can be brutal at times, only because, not because people are saying bad things to you, it's because people aren't saying anything to you. You work and you're not getting anything back. But when you know that, oh, that's just the way the business works, and I'm just going to have to keep working until I do get those occasional, oh yeah, Curt, I think you'd sound great for this project. You get the job. Then you have a chance to develop a relationship and cultivate an ongoing client. And then, so the people who are able to do this over a year or two or three begin to see this wonderful thing, come to fruition. But it's hard. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. It's not complicated. It's a simple business, but you have to have thick skin and a lot of fortitude to work through, again, the rejection, which comes in the form of silence. It's not, again, you suck, but that's what you start to say in your head. Absolutely. You start to think, oh, what was I thinking? Of course I can't do this.
That's awesome.
Don't ever listen to those voices, because they're just not true.
I've probably got reptile thick skin from all the years of rejection, but sometimes it's like going to the grocery store and it's like being a box of Cheez-Its or a box of this, you know what I mean? Hey, they didn't want the Cheez-Its today. They wanted this. So, maybe next time, be a little bit, it's this rejection, you get used to it. But if you don't like being rejected, if you are sensitive, do not get into this industry, because it can mess you up. But, I am so thankful, and we'll definitely have to do this again. I am so thankful you took time to talk to me today. Again, there are a lot, probably most of my listeners and people that are on the show definitely take your words of advice and they use them. And we are so thankful that you are in the voiceover industry. Thank you so much, Bill DeWees, for being on Behind the Audition podcast.
Thanks, Curt. It was my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. To find out more about Bill DeWees or to book him for a project, visit BillDeWees.com. You can also get voiceover training at BillDeWeesLive.com.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at HiltonProductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.